Your time is best spent finding deals and finding money. Welcome to the Multifamily Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Axel Ragnarsson, and on this show, I dissect how seasoned multifamily investors started, built, and scaled their businesses. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another quick solo episode here on the Multifamily Wealth Podcast. This episode is going to be a Friday feedback episode. I think the last one we dropped with this theme or with this focus was a few weeks back, and I got some great responses from all the folks who listened to it. So in this episode, I'm going to answer some questions I've received on Instagram, outside of Instagram, and put together an episode here that ideally directly answers some questions that I would imagine many folks listening have who are investing in multifamily properties. So pick these because I think they're the most widely applicable, and I think that they're also topical right now as well. So we got some current events in terms of how to look at deals right now. I'm going to be talking about how to approach renovations in a multifamily property in terms of getting the best bang for your buck, and then also talking about how to balance property management with growing your portfolio. So let's jump right in. So first question that I received, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because it was lengthy, but basically I'm looking to set my budget for an upcoming project that I'm closing, and I want to allocate my dollars the most effectively towards the highest ROI renovations within the property. Can you talk about what you found to be the highest ROI, return on investment renovations when renovating a multifamily property? So again, paraphrased, but just in general here, I'm going to talk about the highest ROI CapEx items or renovations that you can focus on when you are implementing a value add from a CapEx standpoint. So I'm going to just power rank these in terms of how we think about them. Number one, and there's some nuance here, so I'll try to outline it in a succinct fashion. But number one is anything that improves the curb appeal of the property and makes the property feel and look better. If you're putting yourself in a prospective resident's shoes in terms of when they pull up to the property, what do they see when they get out of their car and walk into the common area? What do they see when they get in the common area? What do they see, et cetera, et cetera? And the reason that these are typically the highest ROI renovations is not because you can assign a very specific difference in rent, right? Oftentimes when you're doing an interior renovation, which we'll talk about in a second, you can say, okay, if I put a dishwasher in, I can get another $75 a month in rent or $50 a month or whatever it is, right? When you're doing a common area or an exterior renovation and you're focusing on curb appeal, it's hard to quantify that difference. That said, it's a little bit easier to conceptualize the ROI when you think about the fact that it affects multiple different units. You can do work in a common area, and let's say you have 10 units that are basically serviced by the same common area, the same common hallway. Well, now all 10 units have received some level of benefit, right? Those 10 units are a little bit more appealing when you take an old, dingy common area with poor lighting and old carpeting, and you upgrade the flooring, you put in better lighting, and you paint the walls. It feels a little bit lighter, feels a little bit more spacious. Well, that has a material difference on all of those units. Can you measure it in the exact rent that you achieve? Maybe, right? It's probably going to be marginal. But the reality is that it's affecting multiple different units. And you're also likely reducing your vacancy over time as well, because the property is a little bit more desirable to live in. So while maybe it's harder to achieve top line rent bumps, you're probably reducing your vacancy, increasing your renewal, probably going to lease up a little bit faster when you're showing those units to new folks. And for that reason, we define everything in the common areas or on the exterior of property as high ROI, because typically it's money spent that affects all the units, right? And it's a little bit more amortized from a CapEx spend standpoint. Now, second after that, in order from an interior within a unit standpoint, this is how I rank. Fixtures, number one in terms of the highest ROI. So that would be switch plates, outlets. That would be, light fixtures, going from old light fixtures to newer, sleeker light fixtures that provide better lighting. That's, the hardware on kitchen cabinets. That would be the sink that you're using in the kitchen, going from a kind of an older, a little bit more utilitarian sink to more of like a gooseneck type of sink. Basically, shower heads, right? Basically all of the fixtures. And these are typically lower cost items that improve that initial impression of a unit, right? And if you're spending, call it $500 on all of these fixtures, on outlets, switch plates, lighting fixtures, but you can pick up another 15, $20 a month in rent, which at least in our market is reasonable given the price points that we're typically renting apartments at, anywhere from, $1,500 to a couple grand a month. That has a pretty measurable impact, right? And also has a measurable impact on just the actual first impressions of those units. After that, we have paint. I mean, that's the obvious one. Paint is going to be, when you start actually spending real money on interior renos, and maybe it's not real money, but when you start spending into the thousands of dollars, it's probably going to cost you at least $1,000 to paint a reasonable sized apartment in most markets throughout the country. Obviously, that's going to be high ROI. And then we're going to go to flooring next. Improving the flooring and upgrading flooring is going to be the next highest ROI. Bathroom renovations, I think, are going to be the next one, typically because they're lower cost than kitchen. But again, people really like a nice bathroom, good vanity, good tub surrounds, medicine cabinet, putting in some towel rods and some hangers in there. And then obviously we get to the kitchen, right? And we all understand the kitchen's going to be, there's an ROI to improving a kitchen, but it's a little bit harder to measure oftentimes because of all of the different options and different things that you can do within a kitchen. I would power rank it as, you want to start with the lowest cost upgrades and then proceed to the highest cost upgrades. New appliances, typically going to be a decent ROI if you're replacing out poor appliances. Then we're going to go to countertops. Then we're going to go to cabinets beneath that. And then we're going to start getting into adding appliances, like adding dishwashers and stuff like that. And because that cost can vary wildly depending on the construction of a building. So it's hard for me to even have that type of conversation here. Then we start getting into other interior finishes like adding coin-ops, adding other, adjusting floor plans, adding bedrooms. Those are typically going to be higher. I shouldn't say adding coin-ops, adding washer dryer within the unit, I should say. Adjusting the floor plan. Once we start getting into knocking down walls and actually readjusting a floor plan or moving utilities, moving plumbing, moving electrical, you had better be very sure that the market's going to reward you for that. This is probably only going to be worth it in B class plus types of properties. Typically only going to be worth it in median rents or higher or above median rent areas. Probably not going to be worth it for workforce housing, C class type of real estate. I mean, it's, unless you're really, really buying at a price that allows you to spend money on renovations. But again, I would power rank it as fixtures, paint, flooring, bath, all of the things that you can do within a kitchen, and then I power rank those individually. And then we start getting into the more expensive additions like adding dishwashers, washer dryers, etc. Some other things I'll throw out there. Kitchen design is one of those things where you can just spend a little bit more money, but if you can optimize a kitchen floor plan to where it's a little bit more usable, moving a stove, for example, from an area where there's no cabinets around it and it's kind of a standalone stove to next to countertops is going to be something that's valuable. Stuff like over-the-range microwaves. If you don't have a lot of kitchen space, maybe adding one of those slide-away islands that you can lock into place that people can kind of use as a makeshift kitchen island. So there's a lot of other stuff that you can do there that's probably going to be high or, positive ROI, but that's a little bit more specific to your project. But in general, I think I covered really the how I like to think about it. So let's power rank again. We have everything from an exterior and a common area standpoint that improves curb appeal and affects all units. And then we power ranked all the interior renos. And then we start getting into kind of design, specialized design finishes, right? And again, that's going to be project dependent, market dependent, and then the class of property you're investing in dependent. So question number 2, a little bit more of a current events question. I don't have confidence in my underwriting right now when I'm looking at deals, having a hard time figuring out what to pay. And I don't know how to adjust my underwriting given the changes in the marketplace. So again, this is going to be, I'm going to try and generalize my comments to apply to a lot of folks. So I'm going to start with outside of the Excel spreadsheet. Let's start with some conceptual approaches to doing deals right now. Number 1, just look at smaller deals. Take smaller bets. It's a lot easier to get comfortable with doing a deal when it's smaller relative to what you're able to do. If you've historically done a bunch of duplexes, 3 units and 4 units, instead of trying to jump to that 20 unit, maybe jump to the 8 unit, right? Try and do something where if you screw up or if the market isn't exactly, the market kind of adjusts and you're maybe cash flow neutral or, you have to hold this for a longer period of time, make sure it's well within your experience range. So look in the markets that you've done deals in. If you're going to be doing a bigger deal than what you've done in the past, have it be marginally bigger instead of significantly bigger. And look at deals as well. And this is a bit outside of kind of sizing your deals down, but look at deals as well that have a pretty simplistic business plan. So not something that's very, very CapEx heavy that you don't necessarily have experience overseeing, but maybe something that's a little bit more management value add focused, right? Where you're, kind of burning off loss to lease, or you're just improving the resident base, or you're doing some common area renovations, et cetera. Number two, in terms of being outside of the spreadsheet, focus on quality locations. If you're a C-class investor, we're primarily C-class investors, or we primarily invest in C-class properties. You can still be in the C plus segment of the C class kind of space versus the C minus, right? So focus on good neighborhoods, good, submarkets, really drilling down into good submarkets, good locations that are close to public transit or close to, kind of downtown areas, close to more important landmarks, grocery stores, employment centers, et cetera. Try to buy something that doesn't have really tough curb appeal from like a neighborhood or a neighbor standpoint in terms of the neighboring buildings. So focusing on quality locations is always going to be helpful, because quality locations are the first locations to rebound when the market starts to come back, and then the last ones to really be effective when the market starts to adjust downwards. And then you want to focus on some actual property intangibles, and this is specific to the real estate. Good floor plans, parking, sufficient parking, minimal functional obsolescence. That's a big thing for us because we buy a lot of old real estate, being in New England. Good lots. Is there like a backyard? Do we have some space for residents? Bedroom counts, right? I always, we like bigger bedroom counts in our business because that means we have typically longer term residents and it's a higher renewal rate versus studios and one beds. So focus on the intangibles of the actual real estate as well, and improve the odds that the market isn't going to hit you as hard as maybe another investor who bought a different type of deal in a different location with different intangibles. So all of that stuff's outside of the Excel sheet. Now let's get into the Excel sheet. The easy answer is buy better deals. Like plenty of podcast episodes that I've done where I'm talking about how to buy great deals, right? But that's the easy answer. And unfortunately, that's not what people want to hear. But it's just go buy better deals. And how do we buy better deals? Well, we spend more time finding deals. So let's put that aside, right? We need to go and increase the odds that we buy a good deal. And when we're underwriting, in terms of how we actually underwrite and define what a good deal is, we look for deals that have a larger spread between our stabilized yield on cost and the market cap rate. I've done dozens of episodes on what yield on cost is, why it's important to use that as an underwriting metric. So just scroll back, 15, 20 episodes. I'm sure you'll find an episode where I'm talking about it. But long story short, if you're typically underwriting to a 9% yield on cost because you're in a 7 cap market, underwrite to a 9.5% yield on cost, right? And then in terms of the assumptions that you're using within that underwriting, be a little bit more conservative with your assumptions. Underwrite slightly higher renovation figures, underwrite slightly lower stabilized rents, be generous with your operating expense assumptions, and increase the likelihood that you actually come in line with your assumptions when you're doing the deal. So it's easy to do that, but I thought that the first few topics as it relates to focusing outside of your Excel sheet first and foremost is probably going to be what's most applicable for most people out there. Third and final question I want to touch on. I am getting burnt out with managing my own units while also trying to grow my portfolio, such as finding deals, underwriting deals, meeting investors, etc. How do you recommend I manage the workload so that I don't burn myself out while trying to grow my business? So, easy answer, go hire a property management company. So it's a little bit anticlimactic here, but in general, if you are feeling burnt out with self-management and you are someone who's actively trying to grow a portfolio, and I define actively growing as like you're out there, speaking with brokers regularly, trying to build your pipeline. You're trying to maybe do some off-market stuff, off-market prospecting or marketing and getting in front of sellers, and you're also managing your own properties. You need to define where your time is best spent. And again, what I'm not talking about here is the guy or the gal who goes on the MLS once every few months, buys a duplex every year or two, and you're going to buy 10 duplexes over the next 15, 20 years, and that's going to be your retirement. That's not who I'm talking about here. You can self-manage, and frankly, you could work an 80-hour-a-week job and still do that with your hands tied behind your back. You're not going to have any time management issues here. I'm talking about someone who's actively trying to grow a portfolio and actively investing time back into their business and trying to do so very proactively. If that is who you are, you should not be managing your own properties. Your time is best spent finding deals and finding money. And I've said that thousands of times on this podcast, so it's repetitive. But I'm still very surprised at the people who have expressed a desire to very quickly and actively grow their portfolio, and they're investing time into property management. That is not where you should be investing your time when you want to grow. That is a commoditized component of the investing process, right? You cannot hire someone to find you deals. Yeah, okay, someone out there. Yes, you can hire some kind of cold call. Yes, okay. You can hire someone to assist in your pipeline development, but you as the owner are ultimately going to be responsible for that. And that is a high leverage activity in your business. That is a high dollar per hour activity. You cannot hire someone or hire a vendor or a company to go out there and raise capital for you. Yes, you can hire equity brokers when you're doing, 100 million plus deals. But what I'm talking about again is applicable to the most of the folks listening. You can hire any number of a dozen companies in most markets throughout the country to manage your property. That is a commoditized skill. There is a price attached to that service, percentage of gross rents, leasing fee, et cetera. So just given that, just when we simplify it to that level, it's like, duh, okay, so I should be focusing on the thing that I cannot hire out that is dependent on me as the business owner. So go out there, hire a management company. And if you want to bring it back in-house, do it once you have some level of scale. That's what we did in our business. And frankly, I did it too soon. We had third-party management until about 70 units. And then I was like, all right, let's bring this back in-house. We hired a property manager. We started our own management company, developed a partnership with someone who, my partner, Ryan, who's building out our management platform in New Hampshire. And we manage 600-700 units now. And it's become a great line of business. Frankly, we started it too soon. Should have waited till we got to 150, 175 units to do that. So that we could have afforded to, so that we could have afforded more staff and to build that out a little bit more property initially versus bootstrapping it. But long story short, it's much easier to start a management company when you have some scale and you can just hire somebody to do it versus you trying to balance your time everywhere, along the way. Yes, you can probably optimize your properties a little bit better than a management company can in terms of reducing your vacancy a little bit more, getting slightly more in rent. You're probably going to spend less money on maintenance and on the expense side of the P&L. Yes, for sure. I'm not arguing with you. But if you reallocate all of that time to finding more deals and you do a few more deals a year, well, that so significantly outweighs the difference on the management side. And that's assuming you're better at it than the management company, right? A lot of people out there think they're better at it and they're just not. There is something to be said for working with a management company that manages hundreds and hundreds of units in a very condensed area, whereas you only manage 10 or 20 or 30. So long story short, it's an easy answer to that question. And I wanted to include this because it's something I'm constantly talking with folks about. Go hire a management company and manage them diligently. Spend a couple of hours a week really checking their work, really, looking at your P&Ls, staying on them when they're leasing units, when you have a vacancy, and reallocate all of the time that you're spending on management to finding more deals. And you're going to be less burnt out, and you're probably going to find the business to be much more enjoyable because property management is an inherently stressful part of the business that is the first thing that you typically want to get off your plate. So just get it off your plate sooner than later and buy back your appreciation for the business and joy for the business. So in general, that's a simple one. But I hope you found this episode of Friday Feedback helpful. Again, we talked about highest ROI renovations, developing confidence in your underwriting when looking at deals nowadays. And we talked about why you should be outsourcing PM to actually avoid burnout. And if you feel like you took something away from this episode or learned something, one quick favor to ask you: share this episode with somebody in your network that you think might find value. You can easily share whether you're listening on iTunes or Spotify. Quickly text or email or send it to somebody, through Instagram DMs, whatever. And if you did enjoy it, please consider leaving the podcast a rating and review. Helps the show get noticed by more folks, as you all know. But thanks again for listening to the podcast, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.